The BDS movement needs to be exposed for who they really are, anti-Semitic bigots. This according to Jonathan A. Greenblatt, the national director of the Anti-Defamation League, who arrived in the country on a special work visit. He spoke with IBA's Ari O'Sullivan.
The ADL was founded over 100 years ago for the purpose of stopping the defamation of the Jewish people and securing justice and fair treatment to all. So for over 100 years, we've been fighting anti-Semitism and bigotry and working for civil rights and social justice. BDS, or the Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions Campaign, many of the students who are involved in it are not anti-Semitic, and many of the universities where it happens are not anti-Semitic hotbeds. But make no mistake, the originators of the campaign are anti-Semitic in their intent, and the climate that it often creates, the outcome whereby Jewish students feel alienated or feel worried about expressing their support of Israel, that indeed is anti-Semitic. So the reason why ADL is focused on it through our 27 offices across the country is we see BDS growing from first being an issue on campuses to moving to corporate boardrooms, to investment houses, to cultural venues, even union halls, religious denominations. And for these reasons, because again, it is rooted in bigotry, and the outcome it creates can be hostile to Jewish students, that's why we're very involved.
Jonathan, what should the ADL response be to the BDS movement?
We have offices in 27 cities across the country. So when there's an incident, when there's a demonstration, when there's a divestment vote, our offices get involved. They respond by helping to empower the Jewish students so they can push back on the prejudice against them or against this Jewish democratic state of Israel. At the same time, we just announced a partnership with the Reut Institute, a think tank here in Israel, with whom we'll be working to do strategic analysis of BDS and develop an action plan to take it down, again, whether it's on a college campus, in a corporate boardroom, or in a cultural venue.
Economists have said that it really doesn't impact on Israel's economy, so why bother? Why give them all this publicity?
Look, I don't like the idea of giving them oxygen at all. So we should call them what they are, haters. We should call them what they are, delegitimizers. And it's not necessarily that today in this moment it's creating an impact, but I worry about the long-term impacts on the American Jewish community. I worry about trying to make the idea of supporting Israel, supporting a Jewish democratic state of Israel, a problem on college campuses. I worry about not what it may mean today, but what its long-term effects are. And for that reason, we're very concerned about it.
Let's take a look at the American elections. There seems to be an outbreak of bigotry and intolerance. Is this something that concerns the ADL?
We're deeply concerned, not about the individuals running, but about the ideas that are being expressed. Because as a nonprofit, we don't take positions on candidates, but we have seen in the last 6 months the mainstreaming of intolerance and prejudice, with comments being made about people based on where they're from or their religious faith, or even allowing white supremacists and other bigots to be involved in the conversation. We think these are really problematic, which is why we've taken money that were given to us by one of the candidates and we've invested it to expand our anti-bias work. You know, in the United States, we reach millions of kids every year with educational content that is intended to stop bias and prejudice and hate. So we're using those monies to expand that work. So while you see intolerance on the campaign, we can educate against intolerance with kids.
You have candidates who are Jewish. You have other candidates whose grandchildren are Jewish. Times are pretty good for the Jews in America.
It's interesting. So if you think about the American election right now, you have the leading candidate on the Democratic side and the leading candidate on the Republican side. Both their children are married to Jews. One of the candidates just had another Jewish grandson this weekend. And one of the candidates for office himself is Jewish. So we live with extraordinary privilege here.
Exactly.
We live with extraordinary benefit here. It's almost ahistorical. But you know what's interesting? If you asked my grandfather as a young person where he thought his grandchildren would be raised, he would have told you in the 1930s, of course they'd be raised here in Germany. Where else would they be raised? And if you asked my father-in-law, when he was a young man, where he thought his grandchildren would be raised, my father-in-law said, of course they'll be raised here in Tehran, maybe in Iraq, perhaps in Israel, but likely right here in Iran. That's where we've always been. So indeed, I hope that my grandchildren will be raised in America. Where else would they be? But I don't think we as Jews can afford to take for granted what we have, not for 1 second.
Israel